Welcome in, guys, to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today, November 18th, almost through completely Week 11 here in the NFL. We got one more game to go on tonight's agenda between the Texans and the Dallas Cowboys. We'll preview that later on in the show once we get more information on who's playing and all the inactives and things like that. But we had a big day yesterday in terms of the stipulations, the importance of some of these games that we're going to go over on today's show. Starting off with the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. A big game for Josh Allen, a big game for the Bills in general and the entire AFC conference, so we're going to go over that. The Steelers get another win over the Baltimore Ravens as well, taking sole control of the AFC North Division. We'll talk about that. The Ravens' questionable decisions not to use Derrick Henry, and whether or not, just touching on the Steelers and whether or not they are legit after a win like this. And, of course, Sunday Night Football, we'll talk about that as well between the Chargers and the Cincinnati Bengals. But before we get started, I'd like to remind you guys, if you guys want to be part of the show and want to get involved with any questions, comments, or any opinions you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to do so. We always are very interested in what you guys have to say. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and your insights. So if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to go about that. Just use the Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat, and this way it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love. And again, we appreciate it whenever you guys are able to do that. So again, go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button and get involved with the show today. But now we can start looking over some of the games that we had on yesterday, and I think the Bills and the Chiefs game definitely had the most riding on it. I would say just from a rivalry, just personal standpoint from the Bills and the Chiefs stand, each side of their respective teams, and also just the entire AFC conference. Because I think one of the biggest points we made in this preview was that the fact that if the Chiefs won this game, there was a lot on, the Chiefs winning versus the Bills winning. And if the Chiefs would have won this game, they would have had head-to-head victories over the Ravens, over the Bills, and there would have been a couple games, ahead of them as well. So this was a monumental win, all in all, from the Buffalo Bills. We got another showdown between Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen yesterday. Very good performances by those two guys, but it was the Buffalo Bills who came out on top. 30-21 was the final score, and now the Bills win their sixth game in a row to bring them to 9-2, and they're only one game back of Kansas City now, with them having the head-to-head advantage over the Chiefs. So if the Chiefs were to lose one more game, the Bills would go to the number one seed because of that tiebreaker, because of the result of this game, obviously. And on the Chiefs side of things, still, they're 9-1. They just lost their first game, and really it came down to that 26-yard touchdown run right before the 2-minute warning by Josh Allen on fourth down to really give the Bills the breathing room they needed to pretty much write this game off, because there was about 2 minutes left, like I said, and at that point they were up 9 points, so the Chiefs would have had to score twice, and there was just not enough time left after that great run by Josh Allen. And now, speaking about Josh Allen and also Patrick Mahomes, Allen is now 4-4 against Patrick Mahomes, including the playoffs, but Patrick, 3 of those wins for his side have been in the playoffs. So, he's won them more so when they've counted more, but still, this is a big win. This is a big win overall for the Bills because of the fact that they keep the Chiefs within striking distance. And all in all, I think not just for the simple fact of the win, but the Bills played very good in this game. They held the Chiefs to a season low in amount of total yards. They recorded 259 total yards in the game yesterday, in large part because the running game was not really there for Kansas City in this game. The Bills did a very good job of trying to stifle that, and there was no sacks, no pressure on Josh Allen either. So for this defense that has really gone after, opposing quarterbacks, opposing teams, the Bills' offensive line, credit to them as well for doing a great job in protecting their quarterback and letting him, extend plays, run when he needs to, get first downs using his legs as well. All of that was a credit to Josh, obviously for his talents, but the offensive line did a great job of that. While on the other side, the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, was pressured 15 times and he was sacked twice yesterday. So there was a little bit of an advantage there, but you could definitely tell that Patrick throughout the game was a lot more. I think the pressure definitely affected him a lot more than it did Josh. I never felt that Josh made an errant pass or anything like that, I guess other than the interception. But for the most part, the pocket was pretty clean, and if not, he made a clear decision to go out and run, whereas Patrick, I felt there was a lot more scrambling to do with his performance overall yesterday. And we mentioned Josh Allen and how well he did. The interception, he had a touchdown as well. He also had a rushing touchdown, and he threw for 262 yards on the day. James Cook added another 20 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns as well for him. And Khalil Shakir, he had a monster day yesterday. He had 12 targets, 8 receptions for 70 yards. He didn't score, unfortunately. Curtis Samuel had the only receiving touchdown on the day yesterday. But I thought Khalil Shakir did a lot of great things, especially in the run after the catch scenarios. He got a lot of yak yardage, obviously, and he was extremely hard to tackle. He put the Bills in a lot more manageable situations when they threw him screens, when he got open and he broke a tackle or just dove over for a couple extra yards. I thought all of that was a great showing by Khalil Shakir yesterday, especially when, they got Amari Cooper back, but they were missing guys like Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman. So I thought he really stepped up in a big way. Then the Chiefs, Patrick didn't play awful. He had 186 yards. He threw 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, unfortunately, for the Chiefs. Kareem Hunt had 60 yards rushing. No rushing touchdowns for them. And Xavier Worthy led all receivers with 61 receiving yards and a touchdown. Also, to the Bills' credit, they did a good job of taking away Travis Kelce. Only 2 receptions for 8 yards. So that was a point where, Travis in the past has really been a factor in these games. So for him to not really be too involved, more credit even so to the Buffalo Bills. But the way the game played out, it was a perfect start for Buffalo just because they forced that interception on the first drive by the Chiefs. Then they go down and they score. They missed the extra point, but still they're leading 6-0. And Kansas City, there was a bit of a lull there where the teams punted and there was a couple 3-and-outs, but the Chiefs finally took a 7-6 lead after they scored their first touchdown. But again, the Bills did a great job to respond and answer right back, and the game was 7-13. But before halftime, actually, there was a big moment in this game where I thought it was a sort of circle back moment. If that makes sense, just a moment in the game where you felt that, looking back on it, that this could have a big impact on the outcome of the game. And I thought I saw that before halftime, because the Bills threw that interception that we talked about and Kansas City scored. They took advantage of it. They went down, scored a touchdown, and they were leading 14-13, but to the Bills' credit, they scored a field goal and they took that lead into halftime. So at that point, once I saw the interception, I'm thinking like, if they were to lose a game, that play is going to be emphasized a lot because of that, how poor, the interception looked. It seemed like a desperation throw, but luckily for them, they went into halftime with the lead. And to start the second half, each team punted twice before the Bills built up even more of a lead, and we're now leading 23-14 at this point after Curtis Samuel's touchdown. But again, the Chiefs not going away. Noah Gray would go and score his second touchdown of the day to keep it a two-point deficit for the Chiefs at that point. But the crucial point, obviously the game-winning moment, was when Josh Allen and the Bills, had that fourth down, and instead of taking the field goal and going up 5 points with very little time left for them to even get the ball back after the Chiefs got the ball back, they went for it on fourth down. Josh not only got the first down, but just kept on going, broke a couple tackles, and made his way into the end zone. That made the score 20-30 with about 2 minutes left. And the way how the game was going, it was always going to be tough for the Chiefs to come back, especially. So I mean, yeah, it was a big statement win for the Bills at this point to put pressure on Kansas City and, not make the number one seed so, already defined, right? To not just hand it over to Kansas City because they probably weren't going to win 3 games for the last couple of games here. So now, that puts them back into contention. I thought with this win, also for Josh, it puts him back into the contention really for the MVP, and I know that's not something that he's probably focused on, but a game like this, handing the Chiefs their first loss, and also the way Lamar played today, or yesterday, I should say, it's a huge deal for him, for him to try and win his first MVP here as well, and for the Chiefs side of things, I mean, no one's hitting the panic button or anything like that. If anything, this will give them more of an incentive to get better. But the offensive tackles and the amount of pressure teams get on Patrick is something that I think differs from last year, where last year, the conversation was about the weapons and the drops and everything like that. I think this year, the weapons aren't too bad. I mean, Noah Gray is not really mentioned too much, but he always seems to pop up when Patrick needs him to. Travis will show up. He'll have his bad games, but in the playoffs, he'll show up. Xavier Worthy, he had that bad moment where he stepped out of bounds on that big catch that he had, but he's going to get better. They're going to get Hollywood Brown back too. Isaiah Pacheco's just about to come back, so nothing to really think they're going to collapse or anything like that, nothing crazy, but the offensive tackles is something that I'll keep an eye on, and especially because you're talking about the left tackle, right? Patrick's blind side. And if you can't block anybody, just your offensive tackles, you don't have the luxury to do that. You're going to have to bring more people in. You're going to have to chip pass rushers. And it takes away from the options you have, obviously, in the running game. So I think, they're getting by with it. They're winning close games. I'm sure they're going to be favored in a lot of close games going forward. But I think, to the Bills' credit overall, good for them to not hurt themselves. Because a lot of times that's how the Chiefs win these close games, where they never mess it up for themselves. It's usually the other teams where they turn it over, they have a bad drive, they punt too many times, and that ultimately cost them the game. But the Bills came in with a good plan. They had a lot of pressure on Patrick, and even though, they had a turnover as well, they forced more pressure, more bad throws, more errant play from the Chiefs. So credit to the Bills. The Chiefs will be all right, and it just makes it more interesting for that number one seed going forward in the AFC that is getting a little bit tight up there, because the next team we're going to talk about, the Pittsburgh Steelers, got a massive win over the Baltimore Ravens. Their biggest test up until this point. I know I said that last week about the Commanders, but the Baltimore Ravens were far and away considered one of the best, if not the best, offenses, and the Steelers defense shut them down. So we're going to talk about that from the Ravens side of things, but also more on Pittsburgh when we return after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to continue on and talk about another big game with a lot of big implications on it as well. From yesterday, a AFC North battle between the Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens, a rivalry, a game just I think everyone's known and has gotten used to being close, ugly, very tightly contested all in all. And, this contest really didn't disappoint at all. the Steelers played its first AFC North game of 2024, and it's going to be the first of 6 that they still got to go through, obviously, over the next few weeks here. But there was no better way to start this gauntlet of a second half the Steelers have to face with a win over their bitter rivals. And with an impressive win over Baltimore, now the Steelers go to 8-2 and are riding a 5-game winning streak heading into their Thursday night game here just in a few days. So they win by a score of 18-16, and Baltimore, on their side of things, now lose their second division game, their first one to the Cleveland Browns in surprising fashion, both of them on the road as well. The Ravens drop to 7-4 and lose, and because of the loss, they go to the 6th seed now instead of the 5th seed. The 5th seed is now with the Los Angeles Chargers. So not a great weekend overall for the Ravens in terms of how they played, but also the results elsewhere, right? They needed the Bengals to win to kind of keep that pace with the 5th seed, but unfortunately, as things stand right now, they are not there. As of right now, they're the 6th seed, so that's where the Ravens stand. I don't think that's where they're going to finish, but it's been a pretty crazy, day reacting to the games from yesterday, and just more on the Steelers, and really the level of play against the Baltimore Ravens recently has been something to just take note of, because other than, just the regular games against the Ravens, the Steelers are now 4-0 with Russell Wilson as their quarterback, and just overall, they continue their recent dominance over the Ravens. Like I said, they've won the 7 of the last 8 matchups against the Ravens. Lamar Jackson is now 1-4 against Pittsburgh in his career, throwing 5 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. And also, in terms of just this season and how things have gone, why I mentioned this was such a huge test for the Steelers is because their defense has been playing great, up until this week, where they've done great against teams that might not be that great when you look back on it. You look at the Falcons, the Broncos now in hindsight, but in there have been, the Raiders, the Colts somewhat, and the Jets, the Giants, these teams that aren't really posing a threat. So there are some questions, or at least I had some hesitancy. I know the Steelers defense is good, they have good players, but what was it going to be like, facing a juggernaut type of offense like the Ravens had with Derek and Lamar, and even guys that they added, Deontay Johnson was there, obviously now coming over from the Panthers. Rashad Bateman I thought was playing better. Zay Flowers, he's one of the receiving leaders in the NFL currently right now. I think he's top 5 at least, so he's having a great year as well. So with all those weapons, with all the game plan around the run and everything like that, and how the Ravens were scoring the most points per game, or the second most points per game in the entire NFL, this is where I wanted to see how the Steelers would react. And, they held Baltimore to a season low, 16 points, and the lowest passing yards as well, with 207. We're excluding the games where they dominated the other teams, like the Cowboys and the I can't remember the other team, but regardless, it was one of those games, the Cowboys and some other team. We're excluding those in all these other close games where, they had to pass, to ultimately win the game. This was the lowest amount of passing yards that Lamar and this Ravens offense has been held to all year. And also, the quarterback rating, I think that was a big deal for Lamar, and he was having a great year, just all in all, seeing the quarterback rating over the last 8 games. He had recorded a passer rating over 108 straight games before yesterday, where he posted a 66.1, which was the lowest, obviously, this season for Lamar. So it's just a little bit to give an idea of where the luck has been for the Ravens against the Steelers. And you might call it luck, you might call it something else, but the Steelers have really had the Ravens number over the last few years, and I thought there was a chance it could be altered with yesterday's game, but the Steelers came out on top as well. That was, though, without scoring a single touchdown. It's the second time this year the Steelers have won a game without scoring a touchdown. They hit 6 field goals in Week 1 against the Falcons, and they still won. And it was the same story yesterday. Great defensive performance, turnovers, and, really limiting the Ravens' offense. But Chris Boswell, nobody really ever talks about him in any conversations or anything like that, and I don't really think they care about it. But he's been as good as advertised and even better. I think he's only missed one field goal this year. And he just continues to do his thing whenever they get over half field to the opposing team's 45-yard line. It seems like that's in Boz's range, and more often than not, really he's made every single kick so far this year. So that is great to see. He hits 5 field goals in this game, where his counterpart, Justin Tucker, for the Hall of Fame career that he's had, this year's been a little bit of a bumpy road. He missed 2 field goals in this game, which, looking back on it, would have obviously made the difference as well. But he missed 2 field goals there in the first half, and it obviously affected how the game went for the Ravens to not get anything back from those drives. But it's crazy how the Steelers this year are 2-0 when not scoring a single touchdown, while the rest of the NFL is 2-18 when any team doesn't score a touchdown. It's 2-18. So it's pretty remarkable. Just again emphasizing the defensive performance by the Steelers in these games, and comparing it to Cincinnati and all their luck, or the lack of luck, that they've had this year since Mike Tomlin. I thought this stat was crazy. Since Mike Tomlin took over in 2007, no team has played and won in as many one-score games as Pittsburgh from 2007 up until now. They have a 61% win percentage rate in one-score games, and they're 5-2 this year in one-score games as well. So these tight moments, it feels like it's personified by the Steelers. They live for these moments, and more often than not, just like the stats show, they come out with wins. They know what to do. They feel comfortable in these moments. Something that we've praised the Chiefs, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes about. The Steelers are, maybe not to that level, but for the majority of time with Mike Tomlin there, they've always been very comfortable in these one-score games. So I didn't think that was just something to breeze over. But what was crazy about this too, comparing it to Cincinnati just last week, I saw something that Joe Burrow threw 9 touchdowns against the Ravens this year and lost both games, and the Steelers didn't score a single touchdown and they beat the Ravens, which I think just emphasizes more the defensive emphasis that the Steelers have and the great defense that they have, but also the Ravens, and not the Ravens, the Bengals. The lack of defense, the lack of standing up in these big moments is something that is a cause for concern. But just overall, the way the game went, really, in the first half, just 3 field goals by the Steelers to score 9 points in the first half, and the Ravens did get a touchdown as well. So it was 9-7 going into halftime. After, of course, Justin Tucker missed 2 field goals, but also in the first half there was 2 turnovers by the Steelers defense that again were big points of emphasis in this game. Nick Herbig forces a fumble on Derrick Henry in the first drive, or early in the game, and the Steelers get a field goal out of it. And then also late in the first half, Patrick Queen, the former Baltimore Raven, strips Isaiah Likely, and they recover that fumble as well. But it was still only a 2-point game, and from that point on into the second half, the Steelers again hit a couple more field goals, but it was also an incredible interception by their rookie linebacker Peyton Wilson, where he kind of got rubbed up on with the pick route that the Ravens had. So he was trailing Justice Hill all the way down the field, and he got an arm in the passing lane in between the ball and Justice Hill, and managed to rip it out somehow. So it was the 3rd turnover that the Steelers forced, and even still, with the 3 turnovers, the Steelers only managed to get field goals. So it never really felt like it was out of reach, and it got to a point after an interception by Marlon Humphrey in the end zone that it came down to the final possession, right? The Ravens only trailing by 8 points. They go down, they score a touchdown, and of course, like most of these games are decided by 3 points or less, it came down to the 2-point conversion where the Ravens needed to get it in order to tie this game up and possibly send it into overtime. But again, the Steelers defense prevails. Nick Herbig completely blows up the play. He prevents, the crack block coming in from Nelson Aguilar. I think I remember it was Nelson Aguilar. He prevents that. He bumps into the guard in the center, pulling towards the left side, and because they get, stop there. Nick Herbig gets in their way. They can't go out and try and block Joey Porter Jr. He sets the edge and he tackles Lamar Jackson, and the whole play just doesn't look great because Nick Herbig and Joey Porter Jr. did a great job of just blowing it up. So while it looks like it was a dumb play or anything like that, it would have worked pretty well if Nelson Aguilar got that crack block down on Nick Herbig. The guards get out to block Joey Porter, and maybe Lamar cuts it back or something like that. But again, credit to the Steelers defense to really put a stamp on the kind of work they've been doing this year, with Patrick Queen coming over, Deshaun Elliott coming over, Payne Wilson playing some big downs for them as well. They've got good production from this team. It looks like they have playmakers on each level of that defense, but also something that was going to be a big problem, obviously, with this game. Derrick Henry only getting 13 touches in this game for 65 yards and zero touches in the fourth quarter. And not only is that just egregious and insane to even think about that for Derrick Henry, and I don't know how to explain why you don't give Derrick Henry the ball more often, especially in the fourth quarter, because this game never felt like it was getting away from them. They were always right there. So for them to just strictly pass the ball, it reminds you of the AFC Championship game where they got away from being themselves, from running the ball, and it cost them in the end. And we're seeing the same mistakes here by Todd Monken again. And if you were going to go out and get Derrick Henry, it was for moments like this. It was for moments like one-score games where you don't want to get away from what you're doing, continue to run the ball with Derrick Henry. And I just thought the Ravens were doing a little bit too much in that aspect, and we're helping the Steelers defense in that regard a little bit more, not really having to worry about Derrick Henry. So that will be a criticism that people will have of Baltimore, but it was the intangibles that really decided this game, other than some questionable decisions by them to not give Derrick Henry the ball. You look at the Ravens, they were 2 of 2 in the red zone, where the Steelers were 0-4. But it came down to the ugly, not really lavish parts of football that I thought won the Steelers the game more often than not. They ran the ball more than Baltimore. Baltimore had 12 penalties in this game to the Steelers 7. The Steelers had more time of possession as well, and the 3 turnovers that the Steelers forced compared to the Ravens 1, I think all of that made the difference, and they usually make the difference in one-score games like these. So I'm sure the Ravens will be kicking themselves, thinking that they should have won this game. That could be a good argument, in all honesty, but it's been more of the same, getting in their own way for the Raiders game, this game, the Chiefs game as well. So they're going to be fine. The Ravens are going to be fine, but I'm sure they would have loved to win this game and, get more in control of their own destiny in the division. But it is what it is now. The Steelers get a big win, and they're on a short week now because they'll play on Thursday Night Football against the Cleveland Browns. But we're not going to go too far from this division, because now we're going to talk about Sunday Night Football, the game between the Chargers and the Cincinnati Bengals, a game that I thought the Bengals would win because they needed to get this win to keep their playoff hopes realistic, in all honesty. But unfortunately, they came away with a loss, and we'll dive into why that is, the Bengals, and why they've been so disappointing in big moments where it feels like Joe Burrow's doing everything that he can, but the rest of the team isn't stepping up. So we'll get to that after a couple of seconds here. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to continue looking at some of the reviews from some of this game and giving our thoughts on a couple of them because it had a lot of big implications, like the theme of this show has been. This game on Sunday Night Football between the Bengals and the Los Angeles Chargers had some of the biggest stakes for each team, I thought. And looking at it, all in all, there was high stakes, like I said last night, for both of them. Mainly because they're competing against each other for one of the final wild card spots in the AFC. I think right now where things stand, like I said before, the Chargers moved up to the 5th seed now with that victory, but the Bengals now unfortunately dropped to the 10th seed, if you wanted to classify it like that, because of the loss. So this game, the loss was devastating for the Cincinnati Bengals, obviously. I felt that they gave another game away, in all honesty. I don't even know how to explain it, because of the fact that Jamar, the offense really is having a great year. Joe is first in a lot of statistical categories, and yesterday he put on a great performance. Really, the second half was great by the Bengals to come all the way back. You're feeling that they completely switched the momentum on the Chargers, and really, you're thinking that the Chargers were blowing another game. This is typical of the Los Angeles Chargers to lose a game like this at home and just shoot themselves in the foot. But the Bengals, much like they have this season, got in their own way, couldn't complete the deal and finish the deal, much like they have all year. So, looking at it a little bit more, the Chargers scored a last-minute touchdown to make the score 34-27 and defeat the Bengals. It's the Chargers' 4th win in a row to go now to 7-3, while Cincinnati loses back-to-back games in crushing fashion to drop to 4-7. Now in 10th place, like I said, in the AFC. The win and the Baltimore loss, like I said, moves the Chargers up to the 5th seed, and the Bengals just drop even further down. Also, looking at the totality of it all, right, for the Bengals and talking about these one-score games and bringing up the Steelers, right, how Joe Burrow threw 9 touchdowns against this Ravens defense and they managed to lose both games, where yesterday we saw the Steelers not score a single touchdown and still beat the Ravens all in all. It just adds on to this narrative for the Bengals. So the one-score games do not fall in their favor because this was Cincinnati's 6th loss by 1 touchdown or less, despite Joe Burrow playing at an MVP level. He's thrown for over 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, and only has 4 interceptions on the year. And somehow this team has 7 losses. It makes no sense at all. Jamar Chase is leading the league in, I know, receiving yards. He might lead it in receptions as well, or he might be close. He's having a phenomenal year, and it's been a year where this was the plan, sort of, right, for the Bengals, in a year where they didn't pay Jamar, and I guess that's the only thing not really working in their favor, because now Jamar is going to cost them a lot more. If instead they would have paid him at the beginning of this year, now he's probably going to cost like $5 million more per year based on the way that he's playing. But this, in terms of individual performances, this is how you wanted the year to go, right? Joe had another great year coming back from an injury, from last year's wrist injury, and playing out of his mind individually. Jamar Chase playing out of his mind as well. T. Higgins contributing. And Chase Brown is coming along as well. I know I mentioned Joe Mixon as a huge loss, and it still is, but I thought Chase Brown has played a lot better as well. But even despite all of that, what you wanted to see personally from these guys, you're seeing it, but the ultimate overall goal, the outcome, has not really been there. And, it's hard to point out why that is. And, Cincinnati's offense almost won them this game alone. I feel like they almost always do recently, or just overall in this year. It's always been the offense that keeps them alive. Joe makes a crazy throw. The offense is just always humming. But the defense or special teams or anything like that usually something just crazy happens, unlikely happens, and you're thinking, what's it going to take for the Ravens to win one of these games? And we haven't gotten the answer. We don't know, because they've lost 6 of their 7 losses have been by 1 touchdown or less. The only game they lost by more was to the Eagles, and that was a fair loss. But all these other games, you could make an argument that they could have won like almost all of these games, honestly. But their offense almost came back and completed a comeback down 21 points at halftime at one point, but they just couldn't finish again. And in terms of the performances in this game individually, Joe Burrow, another great game. Specifically just in this game, he had 356 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, a quarterback rating of 98.4. Chase Brown had 86 yards on 22 carries. He continues to improve as the season goes on. T. Higgins, I didn't even know he had this good of a game. He had 9 receptions, 148 yards, and a touchdown. Jamar Chase added 2 touchdowns and 75 receptions as well. So all of their big hitters, their heavy hitters, did everything you could have asked for in this game, where on the other side, for the Chargers, not really an awful game. I mean, Justin Herbert had a quarterback rating of 94, pretty much right there with Joe Burrow. He was playing very well. 297 yards, 2 touchdowns. J.K. Dobbins had 56 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. And Ladd McConkey, a quiet nominee for Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's not going to win it. It's probably going to go to Jaden Daniels, but Ladd McConkey, even Bo Nix too, I've heard some people mention him, and he's been playing better as well. But Ladd McConkey, 6 receptions for 123 yards for a team that didn't have a wide receiver one established coming into this year. For Ladd McConkey to come in and take that role and I think just grow into it more and more as the season goes on is, again, everything you could have asked for, and something so unlikely for him just to gain confidence more and more each week. That's awesome to see for the Chargers. And I know they're going to add more weapons as, the years go on. I expect them to, just next offseason. But they got something in Ladd McConkey, and that's awesome to see. For them to get him in the second round is paying off very well for them. But just overall in this game, a tale of two halves, really, because the Chargers dominated this game from the get-go. It was actually Cincinnati that led off this game, winning 3-0 to start, but the Chargers then followed that 3-0, early deficit by 3 straight touchdown drives and a field goal to then lead 24-6 at halftime after also the Bengals added on another field goal. So right away, the Bengals are down 18 points, and I'm thinking, this is not how I thought this game was going to go at all. I thought, if anything, the Bengals were going to be leading by like 14 points or something, but the Chargers really just turning everything they touched into gold, and it was all playing out perfectly. But then the second half starts, and we have a reverse of what happened in the first half, because the Chargers take a 3-0 lead, technically in the second half, and they add 3 points. So now they're leading 27-6, much like the Bengals were leading 3-0 by getting the first points in the first half. Then Cincinnati then go and score 3 touchdowns in a row, much like the Chargers did, and before you know it, it's 27-27. They forced a couple punts there. They turned the ball over, or they forced a turnover, I should say, when they made Justin Herbert fumble, and in just a blink of an eye, it's 27-27 again. They made it 27-27 when they scored their last touchdown to start the fourth quarter. And the fourth quarter really was anybody's game. There was punts, there was missed opportunities. The Chargers really couldn't get anything going. You felt like the way the Chargers were playing, that they were just not going to figure it out. It felt like they just had too many 3-and-outs. The Bengals defense was surprisingly getting stops, and it came down to moments where the Bengals had the opportunity to kick those field goals and, take the lead by 3. But unfortunately, Evan McPherson missed both of those chances that he had in the fourth quarter. And it wasn't until, I mentioned that they made it 27-27 to start the fourth quarter. The next score after it was 27-27 didn't come until there was 18 seconds left in the game overall, when J.K. Dobbins scored his second touchdown of the game and put an end to the 4-play, 84-yard drive that the Chargers had there to end the game, to wrap it all up 34-27. And even though the defense by the Chargers, was the number 1 ranked defense in terms of points allowed, I want to say. It's either them or Denver, but I'm pretty sure it's the Chargers. They allowed a season high 27 points in this game, and we said it in the preview how this game was going to be their biggest test of the year because they were facing the best offense that they had in all of 2024, and despite them giving up a season high, their offense, to say that it was matching what the Bengals were doing, I think would be a little bit untrue just because they had a lot of 3-and-outs where, the Bengals did too in the first half, but still, I felt like the Bengals definitely had a lot more to give, or that they were just done a little bit wrong in this game because their offense was really dominating from the second half on. And the Chargers, credit to them for sticking with it through all the punts and all the 3-and-outs. They kept to it, and the last, drive, they put it all together, and they won the game. But overall, I thought it showed great overall performance by the Chargers, the defense and the offensive side of the ball. But I think what I've deemed for the Bengals defense is that they love, when there's no pressure on the Bengals defense, they show up. They get pass breakups, they get sacks, they get pressure on the quarterback, they stop the run. When there's no pressure on them, they look like they play a role, definitely. They play a role in all these comebacks that the Bengals have in 2024. But when you turn up the heat a little bit, when you turn up the pressure and the stakes on this defense, when it's 27-27, right? And now this offense is relying on you to make stops and go out there and keep the Chargers from scoring like they did all half. When those moments come, it always feels like not only the defense, but everything else outside of the offense just starts to fall apart or isn't as sturdy as they might have appeared, right? When you need a play, when you need to keep it close, they always just find a way to not be able to withstand the entirety of the second half or withstand a drive, get crucial stops on third down or anything like that. It always seems to happen right when the moment gets to its peak, right? There's peak pressure on all the plays that happen, right? Once that happens, once we enter into that realm, I feel like the Bengals defense and the special teams operations don't really live up to the standard that we see from the Bengals offense. And it's bad from the special teams performance. We go back to the Baltimore game and we saw the same thing, a missed field goal that cost them that overtime game. Now this game, they missed 2 fourth-quarter field goals, and their defense as well. When you need to stop there at the end of the game, they just can't get one, and they allow a touchdown as well. Not even just a field goal. They allow a touchdown to really wrap this game up. And I feel like also going into this year, there was this narrative, this idea that Joe Burrow coming back from injury, that was all they needed, right? That was all they needed for Joe to be healthy, for Joe and Jamar and T. Higgins to all have great years. And, even despite the slow starts, everyone I think was still too nonchalant about the fact that, this is just what the Bengals do. This is them. They're going to turn it up. In the month of November, Joe Burrow has those crazy stats and that crazy record, but I feel like it was too nonchalant, and I think it's too much of an over-reliance on Joe that hasn't worked out for them this year. The defense is missing some secondary pieces. The pass rush is good, but still, I feel like it could be better. They're not particularly great against the run, and it just felt like they neglected to address some positions, just thinking that Joe was going to come in and save them, and they were going to start slow, but still they had Joe Burrow, right? Everything was going to be fine, and just it's not the way to continue to go about things with a team like this, and it's a shame. It's a shame because Joe is playing great. He should be in conversations for the MVP. The Bengals should have a better record than they do, but they're 4-7 now for a lot of their own wrongdoings and their own mistakes as well, which hurts the most. And I think that frustration, if it hasn't shown already, it's shown just after the game yesterday, where you had Jamar Chase talking about it, talking about the play calling a little bit, telling the reporters to go ask Zach Taylor about it. And it's all true. What he said about Evan McPherson too, I'm sure is going to get some attention because he said, Evan McPherson just has to make those because they paid him to make those kicks, which is true, but you don't really hear people talk about it so straightforward. So it's just the frustrations, right? For the kind of season that he's having, same thing with Joe. It's hard to think that they could do even more on offense, but it's really just been the defensive side of the ball that continues to let them down. So we'll see where they go from here. They essentially have to win all their games, so we'll see how successful they are in that. But for right now, we're going to move on and talk about more on the weekly series that we started last week, some more unanswered questions that I have, this time about the NFC South Division, looking at the Falcons, the Bucs, the Saints, and the Carolina Panthers, and what their future holds, short-term and long-term. We're going to get to that once we return after this break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here now on the show to continue our series that we started last week on this idea of unanswered questions that we have around the NFL. We've gone through each division, a couple of them so far, and now we're going to be looking at the NFC South Division. A interesting one, maybe not the most competitive one, but one that I think holds a lot more of uncertainty that we've had than maybe all these other divisions that we've done so far. I think there's more uncertainty of what each team can be going forward, short term and long term at that. So looking at the first team that we have on here, the Falcons, my unanswered question for them still that I still, have some trouble trying to figure out what it is going to be, can their defense create more splash plays, more impact moments where they at least contribute to the game? And by that, I mean, if they're not going to be a stout defense, against the run or the pass or in any of those defensive categories, if they're not going to be that, can they create, more splash plays, more tackles for loss, more interceptions, more fumbles, things like that, where maybe they're not so sustainable, but at least if you're prone to doing it, if you're more, used to doing it in some of these games, it at least kind of offsets what a great, consistent defense might do if they're able to create more splash plays. And they have players to do so. Jesse Bates has done it. Justin Simmons is capable of doing it. Grady Jarrett as well. But still, overall, as a defense, I think they still have a ways to go. And, looking at it overall this year, the Falcons, all of their losses have been centered around the offense really not playing well or really not up to the standard that we think they could get to. And when the offense really isn't scoring like 23, 24 points per game, it feels like the Falcons, their defense just can't hold opposing teams, to under 20 points or under 18 points or something like that. It's just not something they've become identified with in 2024. And compared to their opponents, it's not like the opponents, play flawless either to beat them. It just feels like the Falcons don't have enough, or they just simply don't do enough on defense to withhold any offense really that's able to put up more than 19, 20 points or anything like that. It's something to keep an eye on, certainly, because they still lead their division, and I think they're going to win it. But we're talking about playoffs now and hosting a playoff game. You don't want to have a bad home loss, right, because of your defense not playing well, your offense maybe underperforming. That's the last thing you want to see, returning to the playoffs after such a long time to put on a performance like that. And it's usually them losing the turnover battle, a missed field goal, or either a run or the passing aspect of their offense not holding up, which really holds them back. So their margin of error is pretty small because the offense has to go out there and win games for them and put up a decent amount of points for them not to give it away by their defense. And I think yesterday was a good example of that. Playing a great defense in the Broncos, the offense isn't really able to get anything going. I mean, scoring 6 points is crazy. They need to do a little bit more than that. But the Broncos offense just had their way with this defense, and it is a little bit concerning, because we're talking about a rookie. The Broncos are good. They have a good defense. Sean Payton's doing a good job with Bo Nix, but that deficit is a little bit too much. So that's where my fears lie with the Falcons. And now moving on from them and looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, my question for them is, can they close out games? Can they finish some of these games where we've seen them be in them and against some of the toughest oppositions? But unfortunately for them, the way things have gone, they haven't been able to close out these games, and now they sit in a position where they have to win out the majority of their games, and hopefully at that point, they could at least get something. Other things have to fall in their way, like I'm sure like the Vikings, the Packers, the Commanders losing as well for the Bucs to even have a chance at making the playoffs. But that's been a question that I'm going to ask myself about this team going forward. Can they finish games off and finish teams off in these games where it's close, but they haven't been able to do it? You look at their last 3 games, they've been extremely frustrating. They were on a bye week this week, but prior to that, it was a 3-point loss to the 49ers. It was a overtime loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, and then it was a 5-point loss to the Atlanta Falcons before that. And despite missing Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, they had their chances to at least, win one of these games. We talked about this period of the 49ers, the Chiefs, and the Falcons, how they had to at least win. Ideally, you would have liked to have won 2 of them, but you would have done all right with 1. And for them to lose all 3, it puts them in a bad spot, now going forward in an extremely tough NFC conference where it's all tight, all the games, and all the teams are very tightly contested between one another. So, it's unfortunate that they've dropped the last 3 games because they are good. They have shown good, resiliency despite Chris Godwin and Mike Evans not being there to be in all these games. But it's just been turnovers, against the Falcons, going for 1 instead of 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs that people are going to look back on, and unable to get a stop on defense against the 49ers for them to win with that last-second field goal as well. So they have a very favorable schedule going forward, but they will definitely need some help. And hopefully, if they do get an opportunity to be in those moments, being able to finish games off is something I would like to see them do and that I still have questions on going forward. Then we look at 2 teams that are pretty similar in this respect, starting with the New Orleans Saints, right? I mean, the question I think has to be who will their new head coach be? I think that's where things at least have to start before you even think about maybe what you do with Derek Carr or who you bring in on defense and on offense as well. It has to start with who their new head coach is going to be. And I can't help but bring up Clint Kubiak, who through the first 2 weeks of the season, right, I think other than, Kamara playing great and the actual players, getting the praise for what they were doing, Clint Kubiak was the mastermind behind all of it, talking about this zone run schemes and implementing that Shanahan, Sean McVay type of offense to the Saints, who a lot of people didn't really have high hopes for, but the fact that they started the year 2-0, blowing out the Panthers obviously was okay, I guess, but the Panthers were the Panthers, right? And then blowing out Dallas in week 2, that gained a little bit more attention, but it really fell off from there. Once they lost Derek Carr and Raheed Shaheed got hurt, and also they were dealing with other injuries elsewhere, it started to slowly deteriorate, and it was unfortunate to see. Dennis Allen got fired. Unfortunate, but I thought it was a move they needed to make. So now, going forward, that head coaching position, I think, unless Clint Kubiak doesn't want it, it would be a name that I would definitely bring up to continue just progressing with this offense, but just promoting Clint Kubiak. I don't think it's the worst idea. Although, if they wanted to get another voice in there who will, once they get another voice in there, if it's someone outside of Clint Kubiak, how would that affect, who the quarterback is, whether or not, they want to run Clint Kubiak's offense, what do they want to do with the defense, right? Usually when you have a new voice coming in, to me it's the best scenario when they draft a new quarterback. So what does that mean for Derek Carr? Are they going to be able to trade him or move on from him somehow? And the defense is certainly, I think, a part of this team that needs change like that. But again, you just have to make the decisions of who stays, who goes. You know, are you going to move on from veterans like Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, Demario Davis, guys like this? Which one of those stays? Obviously, all of these things, all these little individual details are going to come with the job and whoever ends up getting the head coaching position. But, you know, there's a lot of big decisions to be made. You know, they did a good job to extend Alvin Kamara, but it's not all lost because luckily they do have guys like Chris Olave, Raheed Shaheed, Pete Werner on the defensive side of the ball, Chase Young even too, if they want to re-sign him. But they have some pieces here to not have it be a complete teardown, but there are going to be a lot of changes coming. Hopefully, I think for this Saints team, because I think it is overdue. They're just looking like a bit too old and a bit just overdue, honestly, with some of the changes that they need to be made. So maybe guys like Aaron Glenn from the Detroit Lions, their defensive coordinator, would be interesting. Maybe Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins. Jim Schwartz is another name that he's currently a defensive coordinator for the Browns, but he's done a great job with that defense. So why not maybe just give him a shout or entertain the possibility of him being your head coach? I don't think that's the worst of ideas, but Clint Kubiak should also be mentioned in that conversation. But lastly, the last thing we got to get to is the Carolina Panthers, right? Where do we even start with them? It seems like they had some guys come in this year where you thought it was going to be the beginning of something, you know, with Deontay and Thielen and Xavier Legette coming in and Dave Canales also implementing a new offense. It felt like they were going to have pieces here to build something off of going into next year. I didn't think this year was going to be great, but I didn't think it was going to be like this. You know, they got rid of Deontay. Adam Thielen is getting a little bit older. He might be moving on. And the worst of all, you know, Bryce Young, what do you do with him? Is he going to be your starting quarterback going forward? Are they going to get a new coach? You know, they've run through coaches like it was nothing, right? They've just brought one in. They've moved on from him for the last couple of years. So are they going to do the same with Dave Canales? Is Dave Canales going to have the trust in Bryce Young moving forward? Do they even entertain, you know, bringing in a new quarterback or anything like that? And then the pieces around him, you know, this whole thing is still very much at square one, at step one of this entire thing. And I feel like the Panthers have been stuck here for a long time. And it's unfortunate to see just for them not to be getting things right. You know, the defense, too, still needs secondary help, another edge rusher as well on top of that. But, you know, if it's not Dave Canales, then if a new head coach comes in, is he going to be able to change everything? You know, with their owner, David Tepper, not very well liked or well regarded, you could say. It feels like things won't change under him that much. At least that's what it feels like from an outside perspective, really. But yeah, this Panthers team is really stuck in a bad spot because they invested so much in Bryce Young, but for them to bench him and still not be able to figure it out, it's a shame. So my question for them is, you know, I would be interested to know where they start with kind of getting from step one to at least step two in this process. Like I said, they've been stuck at step one for a while. So what initial step they take to try and build this thing up is something I'd be interested to see going forward. But that is all that we have to say on the NFC South. We'll continue with this as we go on until we're done with each division. But for right now, we have one more segment to get to. We're going to preview Monday Night Football that is set to start in less than an hour now. So stay with us. We're going to give you everything you need to know for this Texas matchup that we have coming up here on Monday Night Football. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, just to quickly preview the Monday Night Football game that we have in store for us tonight. The NFL's two Texas franchises square off tonight to wrap up Week 11. Houston doesn't have to travel too far, obviously, traveling to Dallas to face the Dallas Cowboys. AT&T Stadium hosts its second major event over the last 3 days because they had the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight here. It was what it was. It was an event that happened in Dallas. So now the Cowboys have to change everything quickly and host this game between them and the Texans. The Texans enter this game on a 2-game losing streak and with a 6-4 record, while Dallas enters with a 3-6 record and on a 4-game losing streak. So someone is going to put an end to their losing streak tonight, and we're just going to have to wait and see who that is. On the Dallas Cowboys, Jake Paul now has more wins in this stadium than the Dallas Cowboys do all of 2024. Cowboys are 0-4 at home so far, so based on that alone, it plays into the Houston Texans' favor even more to be on the road for this contest. You don't really see that in the NFL, really. But also the Texans have been going through their own poor form. It's not just been the Cowboys and just how poor things have turned out for the Cowboys. The Texans too, have led at halftime each of the past 4 games, but have lost 3 of them of those 4. So they've also been struggling with keeping leads and playing a consistent game throughout the last 4-game stretch here. So that is something else to watch and see if they could at least improve from that in this game against the Cowboys. Also, they've been dealing with their own injuries. Stephon Diggs is now out for the entire year. The Cowboys too, both of these teams, I should say, have been dealing with a lot of injuries. Like I said, Stephon Diggs, DeMarcus Lawrence is still out. Joe Mixon was out for a good amount of the year. Dak Prescott is now done for the year. Kenyon Green, the lineman for the Texans, is done for the year. Christian Harris hasn't played at all. That's a name that I don't think enough people sort of remember, but he's a big part for this Texans defense, and he hasn't played at all this year. And Micah has been injured. Nico Collins has been missing a bunch of times. So the injury bug has stayed in Dallas, or it's really stayed in Texas for both of these two teams, and it's unfortunate to see, obviously, but now both of them are going to be squaring off in tonight's game. And looking at the Texans side of things in terms of injuries and inactives, there's going to be no Will Anderson tonight in that game. Will Anderson has been dealing with an ankle injury, so he is going to be inactive for this game. He won't be out there, obviously. And also on the Bengals side of things, or the Texans side of things, Kamari Lassiter, their young, promising-looking defensive back for them, opposite of Derek Stingley, he's also going to be inactive for tonight's game with a concussion. He didn't clear the protocol, so he is unable to go tonight. There will be no Steven Sims also for the Texans. He usually does their kickoffs and their punt returns. He will not be out there as well. So those are the big injury inactives for the Houston Texans. But the biggest positive for them, the best piece of news that they could have gotten at this point, was that Nico Collins is going to play tonight. There was no injury designation on him for this game tonight against the Cowboys, so he should be making his long-awaited return to the football field for this Texans offense. He was very much missed by them, especially by C.J. Stroud, because I think with all the receivers, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and all the new guys they have in right now, I think his relationship with Nico Collins has been the one that has, I think, elevated above the others. I think it feels like he has more trust and more of a just a better connection with Nico Collins. So the fact that he's missed so much time, I think now coming back into this game and hopefully he stays healthy for the rest of the year, is going to change a lot for this Texans offense if he continues the very good form that he was on before he got injured. I'm pretty sure he was leading the league in receiving yards when he got hurt, and now obviously it's Jamar Chase, right? But Nico Collins was having a great year before he got hurt, so that's going to be a great addition, a re-addition back to this Houston Texans team. Also, their defensive tackle, Mario Edwards Jr.,